As you make plans this season, consider convenient COVID-19 testing from Quest. Get the same test hospitals use without a doctor visit. Simply order online, select from drive-through or at-home options, and get the results sent securely to your phone or computer. It's a great fit for your busy life. With over 20 million COVID-19 tests processed, you can count on Quest. So order your test today at questcovid19.com. That's questcovid19.com.
The Peel Art Gallery, Museum and Archives, also known as PAMA, is pleased to partner with Caribbean Art Fair, Black Artists Network and Dialogue, and guest curators Karen Carter and Craig Manuel to present When Night Stirred at Sea, Contemporary Caribbean Art. This exhibit aims to connect Caribbean artists to the broader art world and includes local and international talent, including Brampton's own Janice Reed. The exhibit right now is open virtually and eventually on-site once PAMA is able to open to the public. For more information, please visit pama.peelregion.ca.
New Theory Radio is presented by PAMA, the Peel Art Gallery, Museum, and Archives.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
Welcome to the special year-end edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa, and I am your host, and I'm very thankful for all of you for joining us here. It is officially a couple more days until the end of 2020, and what a year it's been. A lot of people may consider this one of the worst years ever, while some may feel otherwise, and maybe those people will be on the show a little later today. But this is a yearly thing that we do here on NTR, where we like to do a bit of a look back and provide some perspective on the year that was, especially when it comes to the world of arts and pop culture, while also providing some theories on 2021. So we're going to be joined by a bunch of different guests all throughout the show. We're going to be talking about movies, music, pop culture, and then we're going to close it out. I'm going to be joined by two guests a little later who are also creators. They're also podcasters and radio hosts. And we're going to have a bit of a conversation around what it was like to produce content during this year, because it's an interesting year. As I'm recording this, I'm not at the Saga 960 AM studio. I am recording this from my house. But regardless, this pandemic has taught us that anything can happen remotely. And this is just a prime example of that. And joining me right now for our first segment, which is actually going to be a look back on the year that was involving movies, and not just movies specifically, but just like movie watching behavior. And I got two good friends of the show joining me right now to talk about this in great detail. I've someone who has been on the show numerous times in every single iteration. Someone I can't even talk. Someone that I go way back with. You might have heard her voice on the weekly show, sometimes filling in for Ryan Gertran. And she's a good friend of New Theory Radio and Saga 960 AM. It is my homie Radha Tailor joining me here on New Theory Radio. Radha, happy Merry Christmas and happy early New Year.
Happy early New Year to you too, Nat.
I know.
And thank you for having me.
Anytime. I'm glad you made the time.
I love it. It's another New Year wrap up. This is so exciting.
Yeah, I feel like you've been on every single one that I've done for this show in some shape or form. Yeah, you have. You have. Even that time we broke into UTM that one time and we did it.
Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
Yeah. And the other person is someone who's also not a stranger to New Theory Radio, one of our newest friends at NTR, and we love having her on to break down all things movies. She has her own film blog called Candid X Cinema. Are you still with you're with a new group right now, aren't you, Amanda? Because I remember I got it wrong the last time.
Yeah, so I'm joined two new publications as of recent. So it's on Movies Matrix and Geek Bomb, which I'm really excited for. And yeah, good stuff.
Hot commodity over here in the film critic world. Our good friend Amanda Guarragi. Thanks so much for making the time.
No, thank you for having me, and Merry Christmas, guys.
Yeah.
Hope you
Merry
had a good
Christmas.
Boxing Day.
Yeah, Boxing Day was
Yes.
great. I definitely didn't box, but think I made the most of it. What an interesting year it's been when it comes to movies, and again, Amanda, you're the expert probably amongst all three of us when it comes to all things movies because you pretty much do it for a living, and you still do sort of technically work at a movie theater, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, okay.
we're not there right now, but yeah.
Technically.
Technically, yeah.
And then Radha, I know you watch a lot of movies. Whether they're new or old is up for debate, but
Yes, that's the best way to put it.
but what I thought would be interesting to talk about is obviously 2020 was quite a fascinating year when it comes to everything that happened. Obviously, coronavirus kind of threw a wrench into everyone's viewing habits. I've been seeing this meme pop up a lot online of just a movie theater hallway and how people miss that feeling of just walking through that hallway and wanting to go to theater for and catch a flick. But how would you describe as fans of movies, how would you describe your fandom this year? And maybe Radha, we'll begin with you.
It's been interesting because I'm a big blockbuster kind of girl. So as a result, when it's the Marvel, when it's the Star Wars, et cetera, I like having that emotion around me. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen any type of documentary about it, but when you're in India and there's a movie, everyone needs to like hoot and holler and line up and blah, 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 blah. I've never been to India. This is only what I know about. But when I'm in a movie theater, that's what my experience is. And I cry. So to me, that's what I miss so much about going to the theater. But now that it's been home, I've been getting a lot of updates from my sister and from you and from other people to actually figure out what's new.
Yeah, literally. And this is like the year outside of just being glued to Netflix, Amazon Prime, and eventually Disney Plus. I've never I feel like when it comes to big time theatrical releases, I've never felt so lost in my life. And Amanda, you we talked about earlier, you obviously have a lot of experience working at movie theaters. You're a film critic. Was that difficult for you this year when it comes to the pandemic and just kind of keeping up with what was going on?
Yeah, because what I do at the beginning of the year in January, excuse me, I usually write down in my calendar every single movie release date every Friday, so I know ahead of time what's like scheduled, and then I can like prep my reviews and stuff like that. And this time it was like I had it on my calendar like for each month, and I got emotional because I'm like, oh my god, Black Widow was supposed to come out like today, and I'm like, what? It was so sad because everything got moved around. So in this case, it was like, well, is this actually still coming out on VOD today for everyone at home to like rent, or is it like moved to next year or the year after? So it was really confusing, but like thankfully, we had like in the film community, we always tell each other what's up basically. So I had to try to like rearrange my schedule because like I had no idea what was still coming out. And what I did note was that independent films kind of got the spotlight this year.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
Which I'm just so happy that people got to see different films and not just blockbusters. Not that there's anything wrong with blockbusters. I live and breathe them. But it's nice to see that the smaller films got the spotlight.
Was there a movie that comes to mind that you feel like if this was a normal year, it probably wouldn't have been on that many people's radar, but because of the pandemic, it really sort of came into its own?
One of them that really did extremely well on streaming was Palm Springs. It's a Hulu original and it's now on Amazon Prime. That it's a comedy. So comedies either do extremely well at the box office or they crash and burn. Like there's no other, other thing. So this one being released on streaming, I thought gave an opportunity, especially for Andy Samberg, who is like a huge name in comedy now. He made a name for himself. And it did extremely well. Like I've seen lists on Letterboxd, which I use to make my own lists and like document my my films. And Palm Springs is on so many lists, which I'm really happy about. If it was any if it was any normal year like that, I'm pretty sure that's one of them that wouldn't be up there.
So I had a question for this though. Okay, so I know, right? Because of the pandemic, I noticed a lot more people end up watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And because it got so popular, do you think that actually helped with Andy Samberg's movie, Palm Spring?
Oh, 100%. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I really do think that, because everyone's at home binge watching. So you're like, you know what? I've never had the time to like sit at home and binge watch like 7 seasons of a show. So I'm going to do it now. And then you find new actors and then you're like, oh, they're pretty good. And then it'll branch out into something else, which is also an amazing thing, right?
Yeah, this pandemic's been interesting because and this is probably going to hurt some people's feelings, but I finally watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation over the last few days. And I never, I loved, Chevy Chase is cool, but I never really got into him because because a lot of those movies came out before I was born, I just was like, whatever. I'll stick to my Home Alone. I'll stick to my Elf. But it was so funny that I decided to watch National Lampoon European Vacation. And then I noticed that Vegas Vacation and just their first movie is also coming up on, I guess, AMC. So I'm recording those so I can watch them later, because all of a sudden I'm like interested in these movies that have been out forever, but I just never made the time to watch them.
No, totally true.
Another shift that I want to talk about, because Amanda, you touched on a really interesting point, how you had your list, and then as soon as the pandemic happened, movies started being pushed back or being, released. We saw Tenet just decide to get released in theaters no matter what. There was a shift this year regarding movies that were supposed to be released in theaters, but then they ended up being pushed to streaming services. Soul is a good example. I know both of you have seen it. It looks like it had like 2 different release dates before Disney Plus decided to just put it on streaming. Then Warner Brothers made the announcement that for 2021, they're just going to skip the theaters altogether and put all of their blockbusters. Do you think this will become more of a normal behavior, as we still don't know what the future of movie theaters are going to be? And Amanda, we'll begin with you.
I've been tracking the HBO Max story. I actually wrote an article about it, and I had to keep updating it every single day because there was drama like nonstop from the filmmakers. But the thing is that HBO Max signed the agreement, and the films that are supposed to have a theatrical release will still have a theatrical release next year. And then it will also go to HBO Max the same day for streaming. Wow. So that has caused so much drama among the filmmakers, because Warner Brothers and HBO Max did not communicate that to the filmmakers. So now they're just like losing their minds over it, which it's what it is. I don't blame them at all, right? But under the circumstance, for the year that we're about to have, because it does not look like it's slowing down, unfortunately, if you want new content, this is the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. It's the best way to do it. Especially we saw this with Wonder Woman 1984 that just came out yesterday. People are loving it because it's new content. Yeah. So there is a balance, and this is the balance that we can do right now. You still have the option to go to a movie theater if one is open near you, but this is the safest bet. And I think it's just temporary. I don't think movie theaters are going to be gone forever, but just temporarily, I think this is the way to do it.
Radha, with you being a blockbuster moviegoer, are you open, or has this year made you more open to watching a big blockbuster film at home? And are you now used to not having that communal experience that people love?
Yeah, but I think also one of the reasons why I've always been comfortable with watching it at home anyways is because the price of the movie tickets were already high as it was. So when I think about that, and I think about if I wanted to go out to see a movie, I'm paying at least $30 if it's going to be your popcorn and your movie ticket, et cetera, then a lot of it was already brought onto, watching from Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus anyways. The only difference though is that now I'm almost creating that experience at home with either my family or with my friends if we're going to be streaming it together. And I think doing the interconnectivity of the streaming services, not between the streaming services, when you can watch movies with other people, was almost a way in order to mimic that experience, just because it's kind of like the first time you watch a blockbuster movie is almost like, when you're watching the Raptors in a playoff game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you want other people to be there to share that experiences with you, and then you can be excited together, you can be sad together, whatever
like
it is.
Endgame.
That
Endgame was my last movie that I watched where I felt that.
Yep.
Exactly. So I think that was a very, very smart move from, Prime, Netflix, et cetera. But I do think, though, just exactly what Amanda was saying, that I think this is going to be temporary. And when the theaters do open up, we're still going to see people go back into the theaters to try to recreate that experiences that we had before. However, we don't actually know what theaters are going to look like per se come the future. Like, will it be regular? Are the seats going to be changing? Are there going to be different protocols? How is that going to look? Yeah.
Well, just to kind of close this segment out, just to look ahead to 2021, do you think, considering that there's this light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to vaccines and the fact that some big movie houses are still banking on theatrical releases next year, do you think for movie theaters, this is an opportunity to maybe rethink the experience? Maybe Amanda will begin with you.
Oh, totally. Totally. I think they kind of need to, just how even something simple as like the grocery stores changing their own ways right now during the pandemic, like everyone's shifting in the industry and the service industry as well. So I think that movie theaters have to accommodate that. And at the end of the day, like even the movie ticket prices, the concession prices, like that's why people have chosen to stay home pre-pandemic, obviously. So it's like they have to reevaluate the draw of coming to the movie theater again. And I do think that they need to do it.
Awesome. Radha, any thoughts?
No, they're the same, but she's far more eloquent about it and educated about it than I am.
It's okay. I got the film critic POV and I got the fan POV, so that balances everything out. I want to thank the both of you for joining me here to kick off the New Theory Radio year-end episode. If anybody wants to connect with either one of you, what's the best way? Radha, we'll begin with you.
Instagram, Radha Tailor, RADHA, and then Taylor like you're a sewing tailor.
Awesome. And Amanda, what about you? You got so much going on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at AMXNDA Reviews. And yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Is that Ariana Grande album your album of the year?
Actually, no, it's not.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No, I still love The Weeknd's After Hours. I'm like obsessed with it still. So
well, at least somebody did, because apparently a whole academy didn't, but
terrible.
Well, on that note, we are going to take a quick commercial break here on New Theory Radio, and we'll be right back on News Talk, Saga 960 AM. And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Saga 960 AM. It's our special year-end show, and I'm super excited and honored to welcome someone who's no stranger to New Theory Radio, someone that we've had on the show before, and I can't wait to have him on again as a guest, but this week he's on as a panelist to kind of reflect on the year that was. It is my homie from Stay Out Late, Tremaine. Tremaine, what's going on, man?
Bomb. New Theory audience, you already know what it is. B-Town legend.
Yeah. Oh man, dude, it's been a minute. How are you?
It's I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, no complaints.
Yeah, are you having a good holiday so far?
Yeah, I mean, like it's chill, but I feel like I usually take it easy during like the holiday seasons, like some people like to take it as a time to really go hard into celebrations, whereas I'm like, it's more of a time for me to reflect and kind of like just get a nice head start on the next year. So
exactly. It's always good to kind of get some rest.
Mm-hmm. This year we're all forced to kind of chill anyways, so
yeah, unfortunately.
I like the company.
I was gonna say, like, usually around this time, like, you and the Stay Out Late crew would have done a jungle or something, like
a jungle, right? Or like a New Year's, gearing up for like a New Year's Eve party or something like that. Yeah.
Wait, man, I wanted to bring you on just to, as an artist. It's been a crazy year regardless, but as someone who wears many different hats, like you're obviously an artist, you work with a lot of small businesses, you dabble in fashion every now and then, you've put on events. This year must have rocked your world at some point or another when it comes to just everything that's happened.
I honestly it's such an interesting thing to talk about, and like I've talked about it a few times this year, but I feel like I adapted just like I've had this kind of idea from the beginning, but like you kind of roll with the punches, you know what I mean? At perspective wise, I feel like it was a huge blow to anybody in the music industry, just for the fact that you never think that something like this could happen. Like you don't really understand how vulnerable you are until like somebody takes the one thing that like means the most to you, which is like gathering people from like what you do. You know what I mean? Like live performances all locked off. Nobody can gather. I don't know, like even just like parties or anything in the form of a social gathering that's like where a lot of people in the music industry thrive, whether it's to make connects or whatever the case may be. It just wasn't there. For me, I feel like I ended up doing a lot of things online, and we Stay Out Late, and I ended up doing a lot of like virtual performances and events and panels and so on and so forth. And it ended up being like a really good year. Luckily enough, just because of the fact that like it kind of forced us to adapt and figure out how to exist beyond like live performances, which is like what our bread and butter used to be. But I feel like it's an important lesson though, right? Because it's just like for an industry to so heavily rely on one source, like one specific thing, it's not realistic. It's not ideal. So I'm very happy about what we had to do as an industry in music to survive this year.
Yeah, and you were actually one of the first artists that I noticed that really jumped on that online performance wave, like right away. Like it was, I've seen you and the crew do a bunch of different things. I've seen you still work with the same collaborators that you've always worked with in the city and put on shows. I've seen you and Scott from Stay Out Late dabble in interview series on IG and do different things like that, just to keep the network and the connections going. One of the most amazing things that I think I saw you do this year was I think you performed for the city of Brampton, and it was right around the time when the DeAndre Campbell incident took place. And, you use that performance aspect, and again, it was a heated time because it was like the peak summer where all this racial injustice stuff everyone had just had it, right? Everyone was just over it at that moment and was just wanted to say their piece. And thank God that you did, but you've been able to really, there's some people that were struggling a little bit when it comes to these online performances, but you've been able to do them and make them impactful. What's been the secret sauce?
I mean, I think really it's just, I'm lucky enough that I am just as much a part of my business as my art. So like I am somebody that like I am my own booking agent. I am my own PR. I am my own manager. So like I have my hand in so many things, so I kind of understand when things need to change and how they need to change, instead of just like kind of it hitting me and then kind of having to deal with it at that point. So like I think one of the big things was we were dealing with Riff at the very beginning, but before the lockdown, like end of 2019, to organize an event. And when things hit the fan, it was funny because if 2020 had started or had continued and it wasn't COVID, we probably would have been like live monsters, because there were at least 5 or 6 shows that ended up getting like completely canceled that were like huge, pretty huge deals. Like we were supposed to open for Jay Electronica at the time that he put out the album. Like we would have been like, I think the first stop Toronto.
Wow, what a moment!
Been huge. We had something set up with the city of Toronto that was supposed to be this huge thing that we performed in like a library. So they had this like thing that was going on where you perform in a library, but the takeover that we had planned for the library was going to be, again, like amazing, and all of that stopped. But I feel like I was just so driven by all of the like creative juices that were flowing that I was like, no, there has to be another way. So just talking to everybody that I was already in dealings with, we just kind of figure out how to transition everything from virtual, and they trusted us enough to be like, yeah, like let's try it out.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, because I feel like honestly, Toronto and Canada in general, we're doing the virtual thing a lot more than anywhere else in the world, from what I know. You know what I mean? Like
it seemed like it
from an independent or like lower level situation, because like obviously all the big names like Lil Uzi was doing like online live shows and stuff like that, but I don't feel like a lot of like underground C-level independent artists were really doing anything virtual.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was done in a way where everyone just needed some type of outlet, because once the pandemic happened, I think a lot of people at first like, okay, cool, this thing will pass, but it never passed, right? It became,
no.
Even now we're still in it. Like it's just,
and I think that was like the huge thing, is that like everybody kept thinking, all right, well, it's just gonna be 2 weeks, and then it's over. Oh, it's just gonna be a month, and then it's over. And now like we're at the end of the year and we still are like only halfway through.
So what's your thing for 2021? Like where do you see, obviously there's this light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to vaccines, but at the end of the day, what are you doing? You mentioned earlier you like to use this time right now during the holidays to get ready for the next year. How are you approaching it?
Already in talks for a couple of virtual events.
Amazing.
Starting to, I think that the thing that was huge is that like a lot of venues started to like get really hit like nearing the end of the year.
Yeah.
And whichever venues are trying to survive right now are kind of trying to do more interactive live things that are associated with artists. So a couple of shows that are in the works right now that are going to happen in venues with like full production, which is going to be super dope.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really just like as an industry, I hope that we all find a way to not just sit and wait for things to reopen. Like I feel like the leaps and bounds that we've made to create a space that is respected and that people that can enjoy online is like not to be taken lightly.
Mm-hmm.
And then outside of that, like just the idea of like having people really understand and like you gotta buy stuff. Like you gotta support artists in other ways than like going to their live shows. Like when we put out albums, you gotta purchase them and stuff like that. And like if we're able to have more of a conversation to shift the idea of how the consumer like treats music and treats artists and musicians in a way where it's like more prone to like, oh, this is a natural thing for like an artist to put out an album and me buy the digital copy or whatever he or she has. Like I feel like it will go a long way to making sure that artists don't suffer the way that we suffered this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's like a big conversation. And I guess that kind of segues into one thing that I'm doing and end of January, February of next year, which is a collaborative 3-part series with the Canadian Independent Music Association.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to basically have conversations like that about like how we can bolster the Canadian music industry to be something a lot bigger and make a nice little splash like our competitors, the States and Japan and South Korea.
Hey man, well, good for you. I think those conversations need to happen, and I'm glad that there's all these artists that are willing to have them, because I think as an industry, it's been an insane year, and I think the only way that you'll be able to even work towards seeing some relief is if everyone bands together and has some pretty deep conversations. So
exactly,
great, kudos to you, man. We love having you on New Theory, and man, if anyone wants to connect with you or whatever you're doing, what's the best way?
Instagram seems to be like my lifeline right now. So Eldaati, Ldaati, hit me up on that, and it has my email if you want to send me a little message or whatever, or just DM me and stuff like that. But I mean, again, thank you for having me. New Theory is always fun to be on, and I appreciate the platform that you are giving so many people that like deserve to be speaking and expressing what they're doing to the world. So keep doing you, my guy. You're
Thanks,
legend.
man. Trey, happy New Year. Send my regards to wifey, and we'll talk to you in 2021 for sure, brother.
I know, G.
And we are going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after this brief message on News Talk Saga 960.
Maybe she hear me right a few seconds later. I'm up. Give me the cash, man. Put on the gas. I'm popping too. I just want to relax. We just go way in on the nay.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
We are back here on New Theory Radio, here on News Talk Saga 960 AM. It's our year-end show, and we're continuing on with the fun with our amazing guests. And this is actually the pop culture section of the show. And if I'm going to do a pop culture section, it's only right that I bring on someone who's no stranger to New Theory Radio. You might have seen her Love Shack appear this summer as it really took over the stock market and seems to be taking over every single area of Ontario as we speak. It is our good friend, Natalie Ballantyne, the influencer manager. Are you still managing influencers? Probably not, right?
No, I am.
Okay, still got the influencer side hustle going. All right, but yeah, the Love Shack's becoming like a permanent gig, so congrats on that.
Thank you.
Proud of you. And then we got somebody who's brand new to New Theory Radio, and I actually got to meet him outside of the show, and I'm like, man, I need to get this guy on because he definitely knows how to keep up a conversation. You might have heard his voice or seen him do numerous things for Blog TO. It is D joining us, Danung, if I could just call you by your government name, but
my parents would be so happy.
Whatever, I might as well say it right. So but yeah, thanks so much for joining us, D. Very much appreciated.
No problem. Cliche, long-time listener, first-time callers. Really thrilled to be here today.
Long-time listener as of like today, so it's fine. Yeah. It's okay. I'll give it to you. I'll take it.
You got a lifetime subscriber now, okay?
Legit. Both of you are very in tune with just culture in general when it comes to things that are popping off. When it comes to just things that are happening in Toronto based on the way you're like based on the work that both of you do and how it intersects with just pop culture in general. We'd love to just get an understanding of when you look back at 2020, what are some of the things that you're going to remember the most? And maybe D, we'll begin with you. Like as we're knee deep into the holidays, looking forward to New Year's for 2021, how are you going to look back on 2020?
I think it's crazy how much of a domino effect COVID had and how quickly the word spread, and obviously the disease spread it itself. And like, I think how much we relied on sort of like peer-to-peer interaction, right? Like, I mean, for the most part, technology is our lifeline and our blood, but I think we really took for granted, those small conversations, simple gestures as like a handshake or a hug. Like, it's just so weird to think that in 2021, when things hopefully get back to normal, like some people might hesitate to even shake hands. Like, do you hug? Is there an app that's going to tell us that we're vaccinated? Like, I think it's just that it is going to be the level of disconnect. And the one thing that's really interesting to me is I know that a lot of psychologists and scientists are talking about, kids and infants and, their level of interaction, how weird it's going to be for them to start communicating with, kids their age. Like a lot of what they're going to be used to is like, eyes, because, their face is covered. And so their ability to read eyes and evoke emotion through their eyes. Like, I think that's really interesting. So it's just weird, like how communication has kind of changed over the world. And I think the big thing is the whole Black Lives Matter movement, right? Like you cannot talk about 2020 without talking about the injustices and all of the protests that happened. And I think a big thing for Canadians was, we knew that it was a problem in the States, but I think it really opened our eyes to how much of a problem it is here in Canada as well, with the Indigenous community, BIPOC and all that sort of stuff. And to see, the youth and everybody kind of coming together and saying, hey, like this is a problem in the States, but we also have to address the problems here in Canada as well.
Yeah. And I think when you think of this year, obviously the pandemic is something that will probably come top of mind, but that racial injustice conversation is just as important, if not even more important. Like, I think if it wasn't for the pandemic, maybe we wouldn't have been having this deep of a conversation on something like this. And just to touch on your earlier point about communication, like my daughter just turned 1 and she's so used to seeing people in masks. Like it's just a thing for her now, where we thought originally, oh, is she going to be freaked out? But I think if anything, she gets freaked out when someone's not wearing a mask. So it's an interesting thing to look at. Nat, what about you? What when you think about 2020, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I definitely would say how we experience moments has definitely become, the shift in everything for a full year, whether you were starting a new job or hanging out with your friends or ingesting content, it has all been through a screen. It has all been through like some sort of virtual experience. So I think in terms of pop culture world, that has really elevated a lot of artists, a lot of content creators online to really come to the forefront because they've only had this platform or because they had to excel at that. And as you were saying, in terms of like current events, it has really ensured that predominant voices that we should have been hearing, of course, within our own circles, specifically, a group like us, we've definitely been talking about racial injustice, economic injustice, political injustice for a long time. But I think it really allowed the correct voices to say what they had to say, be heard, and then really get people to rally around them. So I think another big moment is just how community has turned or changed or grown. Even though we either were in a pandemic and you were out at the protests anyways, because it was more important that shift politically, systematically was made, or you were doing the work online in some kind of content creation that has obviously really grown and been number one. And then at the same time, my other thing about 2020 is like, did that happen all in 1 year? Like it's such a weird time mess up with your brain. Like when I think about, this is like really pop culture and not anything important, but when you think about Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston, like getting together early, like January of this year.
That happened this year?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, I was running through the timeline and I was like, that was one of the top headlines of the year.
Right. And so it's just kind of like, I think in terms of like perspective of what happens in a year, this year is nuts.
Like Tiger King. It was funny. It was my wife and I just having a conversation once, and we're like, "Hey, do you remember?" My wife was like going through Netflix. She's like, "Do you remember when we binge watched Tiger King at the beginning of this pandemic?" And I'm like, "Wait, that was this year." Like, I feel like so much has happened since Tiger King, and I almost wish I never watched it. But that's a different conversation.
Or that was like a nice time. Like the Tiger King time of pandemic was like, "Oh, LOL, we're in lockdown." Have you watched Tiger King? And that was like the best it was going to get.
Yeah. Just to even piggyback that, like, I was going through the year and some of the top headlines. Like, I forgot that Parasite won Best Picture this year. I forgot Billie Eilish made history at the Grammys. Like, that was all this year.
Yeah.
Demi Lovato got engaged and separated.
Correct.
It's like everything before March 11th, which again is my birthday, and that's also when the WHO declared it's a pandemic. I still remember. I literally come home and and Rudy Gobert has COVID, and the WHO is declared, and I think Trump was on TV. But everything before that date just felt like a different time. Like even just
like the election happened this year.
That's so true.
Yeah, I've never watched so much CNN in my life. It was fascinating. As we sort of look ahead to 2021, this is always, I find this to be an even more of an interesting sort of prediction or theory, if you want to call it that, being that we are listening to New Theory Radio here on Saga 960 AM. But how are you both sort of predicting what 2021 is going to bring, considering that there's still a lot happening as of this moment? Cases are still rising in the areas that we all live in here in Ontario. There is news of a vaccine, but the rollout will obviously take some time. What's your general outlook heading into the new year? Maybe Dee, will begin with you. And I'm curious because a lot of the work that you do at BlogTO is with small businesses and the community. What's your approach kind of heading into the new year?
I know as a company, like as a brand, our big thing is trying to help, these small businesses and these companies that don't have the ability to get exposure, to give them exposure. Because that's the thing, right? I think like those small businesses are sort of kind of the lifeline and what our city is known for, right? So it's just trying to help them pivot and rejuvenate their brand and making sure that they don't have to close down during this. Because the one thing that fascinating is not the word, but it's just crazy the amount of businesses that have been around for 20 to 25 years, kind of been staples in a lot of communities and have been forced to shut down because a lot of them, don't know how to use the proper technology, whether skip the dishes or DoorDash or anything like that, right? Like that's not something that's in their wheelhouse. And it's just been really difficult for them to adjust. And they're just like, I just rather retire and just move on and go on as with my life and kind of give up what I've been relying on. So I think that's really sad, right? Whether it's like barber shops or, little Italian mom and pop, restaurants, whatever it may be. So I think we feel that we have a responsibility to, to continue to help these businesses flourish during these difficult times. And for me personally, like, I have a videography business and I rely on a lot of live events. And so that's really crazy to me, right? Like what do live events look like in 2021? Whether it's concerts, whether it's, massive seminars or conferences, like, is that going to be a thing? Like, is everything going to be online for another year? That's kind of scary for me. I'm a huge cinephile. Like, I love movie theaters. Our theater is going to shut down. Are we really, like, that's the one thing I'm like, how is the industry going to adjust to not having their films played in theaters and everything being online? That's one thing that I'm really interested to see where it goes. Obviously, HBO Max announcing that a lot of their movies for 2021 are going to be like that ruffled a lot of feathers. Like Christopher Nolan doesn't even want to work with them anymore to that extent. So I'm interested to see what that. Sorry to kind of go away from the whole BlogTO in Toronto, but
no, this is great.
The whole thing as a whole, like just massive gatherings. Like when will that be normal again?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that your business, the lifeblood of it was just going to events and really covering the action, because again, events are being done just as we're recording this episode right now over Zoom, right? Like this seems to be the new normal. And I think everyone over the last 2 weeks has had one or two, or if not three, Zoom Christmas parties that they went to, where again, that's just what you did, because you have no choice. Natalie, I found your situation be interesting because you had the Love Shack idea before COVID, and I'll give you an opportunity to kind of explain what the Love Shack was, but it seems like the most COVID friendly business ever. And I'm curious, heading into 2021, obviously we're going to be staying status quo right now, but have you thought about what it could look like even after we get through this?
Yeah, I think the best thing for Love Shack is, yes, we decided that we should create an experience for weddings that there was an in-between from City Hall and a $45,000 venue. Just, it's not applicable for everyone. And a lot of people, the more we talk about it, the older we get, especially, is that like $45,000 on your wedding, maybe not your best investment when you can have a down payment. That's just like overall. We decided to launch at the beginning of this year. Then obviously pandemic happened and we were like, we'll do it anyways. And we just happened to open when phase 2 opened in Toronto. So we had like a really good sweet spot of being open at Stacked Market. And then we had a lengthy couple of months where it was okay to have gatherings up to 10 people. You could have 20 people outside. We picked uncharacteristic wedding venues. Like our second one was then at a drive-in. So you were fully outside. You could drive in with your car. We set up a whole beautiful scene. So it was still kind of romantic, but people could feel comfortable in their space. And then going into 2021, we have that same idea, is that I don't think that intimate events are going anywhere for next year. And I think, there is a positive aspect in that in terms of people kind of like it. Like, it's not so awful to just gather with your 10 best friends, but create a really extreme or extra, like I'm a Leo, I'm an only child. My whole life is extra. Like my personality is extra, but for everybody else, I think, that's something new now. You don't have to have a 200-person wedding. There's definitely lots of restrictions in terms of parents, cultural. There's lots of ways that, like, yes, that doesn't suit everybody. But being able to just kind of elope or have 10 people, have something really extra for 10 people, like lots of candles, lots of florals, a really easy. Our whole thing is no fuss, all disco. So it's like you literally show up. We've planned everything. The setup is there. The candles are lit. The officiant's there. Photographer's there. You just show up with your friends and party. That's it. And then you go home or go for dinner or whatever. For next year, we're going to keep that way. But, in a kind of loophole, we've planned outside of Toronto venues because we keep getting shut down. But we also have an extremely amazing partnership with the Opera House, which is just like a dream for me.
Oh, nice.
A lot of Love Shack is like music based. Like we want it to be very rock and roll. We want it to be, kind of Vegas without the cheese, but like, I don't mind the neon lights and the signs. And I think that a lot of people are just finding ways to create that for smaller groups of people. And I think like companies, in terms of their onboarding, their Christmas or holiday parties, they've really had to push the boundaries of not just a Zoom, and your holiday or your company office, your ping pong tables, your beer cart Friday, your whatever is no longer a perk of working there. Right. So now it's like, how do we actually create an environment for you to be at home, but all the other perks still exist, but it's not just like, oh, we drink a lot at our company. Do you want to join us? Specifically in the tech market anyways, so I think in 2021, it's a lot of opportunity for companies and for events to be really intimate and get past just the Zoom. So this year I have partnered on another, I guess, like a huge project called Allyship in Action. And they really started because of racial injustices back at the beginning of the year. It's run by two amazing owners of their own agency in Brooklyn. They're very in tune with like the advertising and ad world. And they have made online summits about like calling out the racial injustice in advertising. That's their mandate. And just like why you have to hire people of color, why they have to be at the table, how you script your ads. But the way that they have invited like CMOs from Sephora, from Nike to the table to have that conversation through an online summit that's not just a Zoom. There's graphics, there's music, there's performances, there's videos. And I think for 2021, you'll just notice that event production will have to be elevated continuously online. And yes, we will eventually get back to concerts. We'll get back to the movies. I agree with you. I'm really missing going to a theater to see something. But, I also, two things before I watched, we watched the Apple TV Disney Plus. Oh God.
Totally different.
Disney Plus, Investors Day of like, showcasing all of the things that are coming out.
Yeah.
And there is no lack of entertainment going to be provided through whatever streaming service you subscribe to.
People are locked in. And they're
I'll never forget that day. Especially for 2021, it was like literally a tweet every 5 minutes of like a new Star Wars show. Like
there's like 20 Star Wars shows.
There's like 20 spin-offs now. Yeah,
they're doing a Buzz Lightyear prequel, like a Buzz Lightyear origin story. I was like, wow, the ideas.
Did you notice my background right there? I got Buzz right above me.
I did notice it, but hey, it makes sense.
I have, and one other thing about 2021 is Peloton and fitness creators. I read a stat today that the Peloton instructors make something like $250 to $500 per class, and they're doing 10 to 15 classes a week. So they're making like 250,000 plus as a Peloton instructor. And now Apple has fitness, Tonal, like they're all after that, either the Peloton instructors or that kind of hype around a creator. And so I think that's a huge opportunity for influencers or people online, where big companies are not going to like, whatever, Jennifer Aniston. I don't know why she would even be relevant, but you know, they're not going there. And they're going to like the people, again, with the following who can do the content. And that's where people are going to be investing their money as a corporate.
It's going to be a crazy, crazy time as we approach 2021. But I do want to thank the both of you for joining us here on New Theory Radio. Dee, if anyone wants to connect with you, what's the best way?
I mean, social media is my resume, so like usually that's the best way to get in touch with me. I also have my website as well. My name DHANUNG.com. But yeah, I mean, it's 2021. I mean, it's 2020, 21. I'm always open to a DM slide if that's your cup of tea.
And Nat, what about you?
Yeah, same. Mostly just Google Natalie Valentine. I'll be there.
There you go. We'll provide all your details on our socials. And one last thing, do you think we will hear from Joe Exotic in 2021 or no?
Yeah,
I think now with Trump out, does he stand a chance?
It's going to have to be a story to watch, right?
I'm ready for Tiger King 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tiger King 2, Joe's Revenge. It's coming out. Thanks, peeps. I really appreciate it. We are going to take a quick commercial break here on New Theory Radio. We're going to have more on News Talk Saga 960.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
Hey, what's happening? Oh, you know who this is. Hey, what's happening? Oh, you know who this is. Hey, what's happening?
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Saga 960 AM. It's our year-end show, and I thought it'd be good to close out with two creators that are very familiar to New Theory Radio. One's very familiar when it comes to the world of podcasting. One's very familiar to this station, which is Saga 960 AM. Actually, the previous person I mentioned has been on Saga 960 AM numerous times, so they're quite familiar to anyone that listens. But I got joining me from the people of the community. I got my homie Sumit, and I got joining me from the Element, Gil KG herself, Gurjot. Sumit, I always call you Sumit, but you prefer Sumit, right?
Yeah, Sumit is what they called me in high school and elementary school, but I didn't correct them because I just didn't want them to make fun of the fact that I was fat. So for me, it was like, you know, I got to pick my battles, bro. And that was the battle. I'm having PTSD right now. There's trauma when you say Sumit.
I'm sorry. So shout out to Sumit. I wanted to bring both of you on to kind of close out this episode because both of you are obviously creators in your own right. And this year was, again, I've been using the word interesting a lot throughout the entire show when you think of 2020. But as a creator, there were times where, you know, to be open and honest about myself and how I was producing the show on a weekly basis, like there was times where I'd hit a wall because I just didn't know what to talk about. There was a time where, hey, I'm like, everyone's watching The Last Dance because everyone's at home. I think I'm just going to review The Last Dance every week because I'm watching it, and I just wanted to stop talking.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
I remember you did that.
Yeah. Actually, I had Sirat Sohi on. I know you talked to her recently too. So.
Yeah. I interviewed her for my book.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get some perspective to kind of close this out regarding how this year was from a creation standpoint, and what are your hopes kind of heading into 2021, and if there's anything you're going to be taking with you this year into next year when it comes to thinking about your content. And maybe Sumit, we'll begin with you. Obviously, this has been a very interesting year for the people of the community. You guys had the Yelling Degenerates podcast, and eventually it branched out. Now it's the People of the Community podcast, where you're tackling a lot of current affair issues from I would say a pretty unique perspective. But how would you describe this entire journey for you?
Yeah, I use it as an opportunity to, someone was talking about this earlier, I forgot who, connecting with people, because it's so much more easier now. People aren't really doing anything. And, I spoke to Darshan, who's also on the POC, about like creating this book as a self-help book and interviewing successful South Asians from across various fields. So we did Preet Gill, who was voted the best MP in the United Kingdom. We did Sunit Tulli. Baltesh Dillon was the first Sikh RCMP officer who wore a turban. And less about like, their upbringing, but more about stuff that people could connect with. So like, hey, what do you do first thing in the morning? What does Sikhi mean to you, or Hinduism mean to you? And we were trying to accumulate that into a book. So I used this time to try to connect with as many people as possible. So that looked like sometimes sending 10, 15 emails with 5 of us. So Taman, who's also part of the Element, is also part of our project, and just connecting with these people. Like we did, I don't know if you know Jay Chandrasekhar from Super Troopers.
Yeah, I saw your interview with him. Yeah,
that was one of my first interviews. So that's what I use this opportunity for. I think sometimes we get caught in the whole, and it weighs on me too, and maybe Guarragi can speak on this as well, is like, there's this emphasis on always hustling. Like any downtime should be used towards a certain goal. And that's something that I tackled a ton the first half of the year, but now I'm like, I'll do it on my own pace. And my focus is on just creating when I have the time to. We're juggling so many things, and I just don't want people to get caught up into that. You just want to be the better you. You just got to make sure you're better than yesterday. Because as soon as we start like chasing what hustle is and what productivity looks like, I think that's like a never-ending cycle.
For me, I was that guy that was hustling nonstop, and when the pandemic happened, I just kind of threw my hands in the air, being like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what am I doing with my life? And it was a tough adjustment to really get through it. Guarragi, you were going to say?
There was a lot of pressure though in the beginning, like on a lot of social media platforms, where people would kind of pressuring each other, like, what are you doing with this downtime? How are you making yourself a better person? And so if you already have that hustling type of mentality, it obviously like put even more of a weight and pressure. And I know Taman felt that a lot in the beginning. I didn't. I don't care what nobody says, but I know Taman felt that a lot in the beginning. And I think a lot of people actually felt that a lot, like, oh, how are we going to adjust to this and adapt to this? And it was that. But I think what's nice is, though, it kind of taught a lot of people kind of like where the balance is. Like for Taman, I know she found it as well. And for myself, I found it as well. Of how you can be productive, but also like kind of do things at your own pace, because that's what everybody kind of had to do this year. And what you said earlier, you were like, I didn't know what to talk about. I'm not gonna lie, the first few shows we had to record at home, it was kind of hard not to bring up COVID, because I feel like every week there was new information, there was something new that needed to be discussed. And now, like a year later, it's just kind of like, oh, well, we're still in a pandemic. Nothing's really significantly changed that much.
And it was taxing, really. Like I at one point I got funny enough, my last episode in the studio, the week that we got into our first official lockdown, was with Darsh and Sachin. And
I think I remember this.
Yeah, I left the studio that day assuming, is this show gonna happen next week? And I remember telling Jyoti, and Jyoti's like, yeah, we'll keep it going, because that was the first time I got into the studio where we had to sanitize everything. Regarding when it came to producing each of your shows, what have you, because of the pandemic, what have you done differently now, or because of this year actually, because we're still in the pandemic, but because of 2020? What are some new approaches that you've taken? Guarragi, we'll start with you.
Well, we never meet, as we were saying off air, is that before we always like booked people in based on who could come on live with us, right? So who could come into the studio, which limited the people that we could bring into the studio. So because of the pandemic, we just reached out to people all across Canada, all over the world, actually, in order to record with them and do shows with them. So it definitely made us, me and Taman as well, more confident to just shoot that shot and ask someone. And obviously people are more available, so more likely people will say yes because of the pandemic, but that's definitely made us more confident into just reaching out to whoever we want and just shooting our shot and seeing if we can just get them on the show. And going forward, that's definitely a really, I think, a good skill that we're going to carry forward in a beneficial way.
Yeah, technology has definitely enabled that. And Samit, I'm assuming that's an approach that you guys have taken as well.
For sure, I agree with what Gujot said, but the problem is now everyone's approachable to everyone. So how do you differentiate yourself? So like, you have 10 people emailing the same person because they think that he or she has time. So for me, it's like there's, so many people are doing Insta lives, like me and Nav did an Insta live. So many people started podcasts, like, and famous celebrities with huge backing started this. So how do you differentiate yourself? And I was like, maybe people might call this regressing, but go towards books. Go towards a medium where like it's more accessible. Because now, let's say if I type in Sirat Sohi and I go on YouTube, there's actually like 10 interviews. One of them is with me, one's with you. Which one do I listen to, and which one's giving me the information that I want to hear? I feel like if we can like create another a medium where it's more accessible to what I want to hear. So like this Sirat Sohi interview makes more sense to me because I'm looking for, like, I think you had her on for The Last Dance.
I did.
So and I had her on for what she has for breakfast first thing in the morning. So maybe creating a medium where there's a possibility where you can differentiate from one another, because access for everyone now, it's like, God, like so many celebrities are starting podcasts. Like, what's his name? Jim Krasinski, the guy from The Office.
Yeah, he has good news.
Morning show, and he sold it to like NBC for like millions of dollars.
Yeah, and it was like done from his house, right?
Yeah, it's done from his house. I think it's called Good. Yeah, you said Good News, right?
Yeah. I was gonna add, like, Sumit, you bring up a good point regarding how when it comes to the content that's out there, trying to find a way to differentiate yourself. The one thing I always think about now during this pandemic is the fact that anyone who's taking in, whether it's my content, your content, or Gujot's content, we're indirectly competing with the Joe Rogans and the Netflix and the Disney Pluses of the world, like more so than ever.
I think because you set aside certain, I think listening to podcasts is very routine. So for me, it's like first thing in the morning, drive to work, drive back to work. When all of that is in a jumble, you sort of substitute that with, hey, I'll watch a YouTube clip on cooking instead. So I think we saw a decrease as well. You know what? Like, I understand there's so many podcasts, and I feel like I'm competing against a ton of people as well. And I'm trying to figure out a niche. But like the only thing that I can do, and I think you guys might agree with this, is just perfect our craft.
What are you guys looking forward to in 2021? What's the approach you're taking? Anything from this year that you're taking with you? Or in general, what do you hope to see in the new year when it comes to being a content creator? And Sumit, we'll begin with you.
At this time next year, both of you should have a copy of our book, and you should have gifted a couple. Like, I'm hoping that's has to happen. And like, I think there is still a little bit of an unknown. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID. I think that this summer everything's going to be better. But that's my goal, is to finish this book and interview some like really important and cool people. So I'm just working on that. And I'm just hoping Bitcoin hits $100,000. So that's it.
So for the element, like we've had the show for like 2 years now, but this was completely new for myself and for Thaman. And these 2 years have just been trying to figure out what do we want to actually talk about on the element, and creating our niche as well. And yeah, we're feminists and we're activists, and there's so much content, right? And how are we going to narrow that down? And me and Thaman, I think next year we're going to hone our craft at least more so than we did before. Like we're finally putting our podcast like shows up. So we have like 5 podcasts up. Thaman's working on the website, so we'll have that up. So like we're just going to perfect that more in a way that so it's like available content, because a lot of the times for us, as so many people were like, all right, how do we listen? And we didn't have anything available before.
Guys, this was a great chat. I think we can do like an entire episode on this. But
I plug my is it cool?
Sumit, plug what we have coming up in the first week of January.
So at the start of COVID, we raised $3,500 for food bank, Save a Food Bank, Toronto Food Bank. I did an Insta Who Wants to Be a Millionaire live. Nav participated. Noise almost won. I think he won $900 and he gave it to one of the food banks. This time I'm going to be interviewing people on Insta Live on the POC channel, like a whole day. I don't have a certain date, but if you'd like to contribute or if you'd like to take part, just DM me on Instagram or DM people of the community, and look out for us our goal is $10,000, and I'm sure we'll get there. So any support would be much appreciated.
Excellent. Guarragi, you want to? I know you're working with your crew, Pink Attitude. Any updates you want to provide on that?
Oh, well, Pink Attitude is honestly, I'm so glad I actually met these people. And so basically Pink Attitude is this organization that they want to uplift, recognize South Asian women in different industries, in their respective industries that are kind of breaking barriers and breaking the glass ceilings. And I write for them. I write for their newsletter. And being able to have this network, because they have people in like big positions, like executive positions. So being able to have a connection with this network, we launched this initiative called Project Pink, and the goal was to raise $10,000, and we were able to raise $13,400, which was crazy.
Amazing.
And it was amazing. And we were able to give out essential items, blankets, a whole bunch of stuff to over 200 people in the homeless communities. And we were also able to provide like $200 gift cards to domestic violence families living in a domestic violence shelter. So because of COVID-19, homelessness increased and domestic violence cases. And actually what originally in these domestic violence shelters, there were like maybe 2 South Asian families, but because of the pandemic, it increased by 80%, which is wild. So we were able to kind of service all these people. And now I kind of convinced them to make this an annual thing. So yeah, it was really cool, really exciting. And because of them, I'm able to like kind of improve on my writing skills, because I just wrote poetry before and like fiction. So now I'm actually writing for a newsletter for like people. Yeah. So it's kind of great. It's great. I'm getting that hands-on experience that I wasn't really able to formally get through in education. So
awesome. Well, great job to the both of you. If I don't talk to you, Happy New Year. Have a safe and happy end to your holiday. And this actually concludes this week's edition of New Theory Radio, or should I say this year's edition of New Theory Radio. I wanted to thank all of you for tuning in, not just for today, but for the entire year. What a year 2020 was, and we honestly wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for all of your support. So thank you so much. Big shout outs to my little brother Nav Nanwa for all of his support this year on the graphics, as well as Dusty Loops for all of his production when it comes to our theme song, as well as the other songs that you hear throughout our show. Big shout outs to our Saga 960 AM family, such as Praveen, Jyoti, and everybody else. Big thanks to all the guests that we had on today's show. So shout outs to Amanda, Radha, Tremaine, Dee, Natalie, Guarragi, and Samit. And we also just recently launched merch. So if you want some New Theory swag, whether it's a hoodie, whether it's a long sleeve, whether it's a t-shirt, visit shop.newtheoryradio.com. There is swag available from now until January 1st. And if you want to connect with me, it is at Nav Nanwa on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it is at New Theory Radio across all social platforms. And this is a wrap for this week's edition of NTR, the year-end edition. And yes, you will hear us all in 2021. Not next week. We're actually going to be taking next week off. We're going to re-air a classic episode of New Theory Radio, but we will be back the week after with a brand new show to officially kick off the new year of NTR. Thank you so much. Happy holidays, happy new year, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.
As you make plans this season, consider convenient COVID-19 testing from Quest. Get the same test hospitals use without a doctor visit. Simply order online, select from drive-through or at-home options, and get the results sent securely to your phone or computer. It's a great fit for your busy life. With over 20 million COVID-19 tests processed, you can count on Quest. So order your test today at questcovid19.com. That's questcovid19.com.
This episode is sponsored by Schwans.com. What are you having for dinner tonight? Good question. Schwann's Home Delivery has a solution for you. Stock up your freezer with high-quality frozen foods like premium meats and sides, delicious ready-made meals, ice cream, and more. No subscriptions, no memberships, just a friendly yellow truck that's been delivering food for almost 70 years. Listeners of this show get a special deal. Get 20% off your first order with code YUM20. Check out schwans.com/YUM for details.